Alright. It's time to learn the tools of the trade. Let's take a look at weapons in Destiny. To start off, we'll take a look at the character screen. If you press I by default, if you're on keyboard, you'll see this screen. For now, we're going to be concerned with this area in the red box. Taking a closer look, we see 3 weapon slots. On the left over here, your top slot I'm going to be referring to as the kinetic slot. The middle slot is your energy slot, and the bottom slot is your heavy slot. To the right of these, you have 3 boxes that indicate which weapons you have equipped that are useful against champions. In this case, the top square, or the barrier champion symbol, is lit up because I have an anti-barrier weapon. The types of weapons that are effective against champions, it changes every season, so refer to your seasonal artifact to see which weapons you should be using against what champions. If we hover over one of our weapons, we get this preview screen here, and in addition, you can see 9 other spaces full of weapons which occupy the same slot as the weapon that you are currently hovering over. This means you can have 10 total weapons in your inventory per weapon slot. Let's take a closer look at this preview screen here. If you want, pause this so that you can take in all the information. The most important things are your gear type, your gear level, the ammo type, your rarity, and the traits. And also you can see in the bottom right of this preview, there's a little button indicator that says details. Let's go to the details screen next. Here we have a detailed view of your weapon. That red box indicates the area in which we'll find the item name, the item type, and some flavor text. The green box denotes the area where you will find your weapon's perks. The dark blue box indicates the area where you will find your weapon upgrades. The yellow box contains the frame of the weapon. The purple box contains the weapon's power level and the kill tracker if you have one equipped. And the light blue box shows off the weapon stats, including the weapon's level if it has one. Taking a closer look at the perk and upgrade area, I've numbered out the weapon perks based on columns. So you can see here, column 1 is your barrel perks, column 2 is your magazine perks, column 3 I'll be referring to as the 3rd column, and column 4 is the 4th column for obvious reasons, I would hope. Where I've labeled O is your origin trait if your weapon has one, and T is where you will see your kill tracker options if it has one. The 3rd and 4th column are where you're going to want to be paying the most attention when you're looking at a weapon to see whether or not you should keep it, but we'll get to that in a bit. On the bottom row, we have another 5 squares to keep track of here. Spot 5 is your infusion box. If you hover over that, you will see the options you have to infuse your weapon to a higher power level. Doing so will require an upgrade module and a weapon that has a higher power level than the weapon you are currently inspecting. Square 6 is your weapon mod slot. Weapon mods provide a minor boost. In this image I have a backup mag weapon mod equipped. Square 7 shows your enhancement tier. If you have an enhanced weapon, your weapon is not enhanced or not capable of being enhanced, this is where your masterwork will show up. Masterworks provide a small boost to one of your weapon's stats, similar to the weapon mod. It will increase a specific stat of your weapon by 10 when you have it maxed out. Unlike the masterwork, if you have an enhanced weapon and you choose to enhance it, this will enhance your weapon's perks instead of your weapon's stats. So in this image you could see there is a yellow arrow in the columns 3 and 4 weapon perks. That indicates that those perks are enhanced. Square 8 is your level up node. If you choose to, you can expedite the leveling process of your weapon by spending upgrade materials and a glimmer instead of earning weapon XP strictly through kills and damage. Finally, square 9 is your memento slot. If you have a crafted weapon or an enhanced weapon, this slot will appear. Mementos can drop from a variety of activities, and they simply provide some cosmetic effects, such as a kill tracker and a special shader for your weapon. If you'll remember from our preview page, we saw the ammo type in the light green box. Here we have a list of the ammo types and the weapon damage types. So you can see here we have primary, special, and heavy. If you go back to the weapon preview slide that I showed earlier, you could see where you could find out which type it is. Heavy weapons, as the name might suggest, will always be in your third or heavy slot. Primary and special weapons can be in either your energy or kinetic slot. Additionally, each weapon has one of these following 6 damage types. Kinetic, strained, and stasis weapons will always occupy the kinetic slot, as the name might suggest. Solar, void, and arc weapons will always occupy the energy slot. Heavy weapons can be strained, stasis, solar, void, or arc. As of now, there are no kinetic heavy weapons that are not exotic. And to be clear, there is no association between the ammo type of a weapon and its damage element. Any of these element of weapons can be primary or special, or heavy with the exception of kinetic, as I said earlier. Now, if you'll remember, I said that I would be talking about the third and fourth column perks in a bit. Well, now is that bit. What I've compiled right here is a list of perks to be looking for in the third column. I've divided them into 3 categories here, the first being ability. These 3 perks, strategist, pugilist, and demolitionist, will give you ability energy, class ability, melee ability, and grenade ability, respectively, when you get kills with a weapon that has the perk equipped. These perks you want to be looking out for if your build revolves around using your class ability, your melee ability, or your grenade ability. Next category I've got here is utility. As the name might suggest, these are perks that provide some general utility. Shoot to loot allows you to pick up ammo and orbs from a distance. Attrition orbs allows you to make orbs of power more reliably. Field prep grants more ammunition in reserves. This is generally good for special and heavy weapons. Lead from gold is a perk that you will only find on special ammo weapons. It allows you to generate special ammo when you pick up heavy ammo. Rangefinder is generally a good perk if you find yourself in long distance engagements. Repulsor brace is a perk you will only ever find on void weapons. It will give you an overshield if you defeat a target debuffed by void weapons. And Heal Clip. Heal Clip is a perk you will only ever find on solar weapons. It will give you health if you reload after killing a target. And the final category I have for third column perks are reload perks. These perks are all about speeding up or avoiding a reload altogether. Outlaw, Rapid Hit, and Enlighten Action all speed up the reload. You could read the perk descriptions if you find one on your weapon to find out how. Triple Tap, 4 times the charm and Subsistence all add ammo to your magazine, prolonging the time until you have to reload. Again, read the perk description if you find one on your weapon. Auto-loading holster, Overflow, Envious Assassin, and Reconstruction are capable of reloading your weapon while you do not have them equipped, and this is capable of directly bypassing the reload you would have to do if you had the weapon in your hands when it ran out of ammo. Clown Cartridge kind of fits into the triple tap category. When you reload, it has a chance to overflow the magazine by a random amount. Additionally, this next slide that I'll put up will have fourth column perks. If you see a perk that would normally be in the fourth column in the third column, it's generally a good idea to have it in there. Here we have our recommended fourth column perks. I'm not going to go super in-depth into a lot of these. Basically, any perk that you're looking for in the fourth column involves increasing your damage on your weapon or your AoE/add clear capabilities. Firefly, Dragonfly, Chain Reaction all fit into that add clear category. Most of the rest of these are strictly damage focused. Focus Fury, Precision Instrument, and Bait and Switch are very good boss DPS phase sort of perks. Specifically, Focus Fury and Precision Instrument you want on some sort of precision weapon, such as a sniper rifle or a linear fusion rifle. Cascade Point is one of my personal favorites. It's a bit silly, but it's also really fun, and it increases your DPS. Now, once we get to Trench Barrel, we start looking at weapon type specific perks. Trench Barrel and 1-2 Punch you will only find on shotguns. Controlled Burst you will only find on fusion rifles. Explosive Head you will only find on bows. Explosive Light you will only find on explosive weapons, such as heavy grenade launchers or rockets. Lasting Impression and Bipod you will only find on rockets. And last, we have our damage type specific perks. Chill Clip and Headstone will only be found on stasis weapons. Hatchling will only be found on strand weapons. Kinetic Tremors will only be found on kinetic weapons. Incandescent will only be found on solar weapons. Destabilizing Rounds will only be found on void weapons, and Volt Shot will only be found on arc weapons. pretty much any weapon that has a perk from this third column list in the third column and a fourth column perk in the fourth column, you should be fine to keep, and it'll perform well in general content and even in some higher end content. Now for the rest of the video, I've prepared a exhibition of each of the weapon types and each of the weapon archetypes within those types, as well as a recommendation or 2 or 3 of a weapon from each of these categories that you could get without having to buy any of the expansions. You could focus them from one of the activity vendors or Banshee in the tower. In addition, wherever possible, I'm going to recommend weapons from the Onslaught activity. Onslaught provides some of the best weapons in the game, and I would highly recommend you give it a shot. It's a fun activity, and as I said, it provides some of the best weapon loot in the game. If you talk to Zavala, you can focus the weapons from the Onslaught loot pool. This will give it a higher drop chance for when you're actually playing Onslaught, so it's a good idea to find one that you want and focus it at Zavala before you start diving into the Onslaught activity. And I'll show you exactly where that is here. Alright, 2 more slides before we get into the actual weapon footage. Right here, this is just something to show what all is going on the screen during the footage. This big square will be an image that represents the frame or archetype of the weapon. Below that, I have the archetype name, and below that, if I have something in quotes, it is a quality or some other factor that identifies the weapon. So in this image, 140 is the RPM of the weapon. This is a hand cannon, so if you hear anyone refer to a 140 hand cannon, they're referring to the adaptive frame. Anytime I have something in quotes like this, it will be referring to the RPM of the weapon, with the exception of shotguns, which I will explain when we get to the shotgun section. And at the end of the exhibition of all the archetypes, I will have an image like this in the top right corner. This is your weapon suggestion. At the top in the red box, I have the profile of the weapon. This shows the thumbnail image for the weapon and the name of the weapon. On the left side, I will have recommended third column perks, and on the right side, I will have recommended fourth column perks that could drop on this weapon. Alright, let's get into it with hand cannons. Hand cannons have a special attribute to them, which allows them to do extra damage to yellow health bar or major enemies. And besides that, I mean, who doesn't like a revolver? They're cool. Starting out, we have the adaptive frame hand cannons, or 140s, as I mentioned earlier. This is my personal favorite archetype. Next, we have aggressive or 120 hand cannons. These are pretty similar to the 140 hand cannons. Next up, we have the precision or 180 hand cannons. If you're a hunter and you're using Lucky Pants, this might be a good pick for a damage option. And here we have the real pick for Lucky Pants damage, and the heavy burst hand cannon. There's only a few of these in the game right now, so if you can't get your hands on one, don't feel too bad about it. Here are my recommendations. Bottom dollar is a 120 hand cannon that you could get from the Drifter or Gambit activities. And from Onslaught, we have Luna's Howl, which is a solar hand cannon, and Midnight Coup, which is a kinetic 140 hand cannon. Notably, Midnight Coup has 2 damage perks in the third column, those being Explosive Payload and Firefly, and aside from that, you have your pick of One for All, Kinetic Tremors, or Rampage in the fourth column. I would go with One for All or Kinetic Tremors. Next up, we have Auto Rifles, your mid-range, fully automatic weapon rifle variant. Once again, we're starting with my personal favorite, the 720 or Rapid Fire Autos. Next up, I'll pick these alongside a 720 auto rifle any day. We have the adaptive or 600 auto rifles. After that, we have the precision or 450 autos. And we have the 360 or high impact auto rifles. These ones are a bit too slow feeling for me, but if you like him, then by all means use him. Lastly, we have the support frame auto. There's only one of these in the game at the moment, and it requires the final shape expansion, but if you do have that, I think it's pretty cool, so try it out if you have access to it. For my auto rifle picks, I would go with Crate. This is a 720 auto or rapid fire that you can focus at Banshee. It's in the Viced category. Something I forgot to mention, in the background of the weapon suggestion screen, if there is a foundry associated with the weapon, I will have its symbol in the background. And in the energy slot, we have this Koronok. This is a Suros weapon, it's a 600 auto. Next up we have pulse rifles. These are your mid to long range sort of precision options as opposed to auto rifles. First up we have the rapid fire. You'll see that this is a bit of a trend, but I do like the rapid fire variants of weapons. Now once again, there's only one of these in the game, and RPM wise they're identical to a archetype we'll be coming up on next, but I figured I'd mention it here. The Legacy pulse rifle frame is meant to mimic the battle rifle from the Halo franchise. You can find this battle rifle weapon in the 30th anniversary Dares of Eternity event if you have access to it. Next up we have the heavy burst pulse rifles. Once again, there are very few of these in the game, so don't feel too bad if you can't get your hands on one. These are pretty cool. I don't know if I like them yet as much as the rapid fires, but still, they're very cool. Now here's the frame that the Legacy frame is very similar to, the lightweight pulse frame. These are a good option if you don't have a rapid fire. They're still pretty quick. Next up we have the adaptive pulse rifle frame. And lastly, we have the aggressive pulse rifle frame. Notably, the aggressive frame shoots a burst of 4 instead of a burst of 3. For my suggestions, first from Banshee, you could focus a Battle Scar. This is a lightweight frame pulse rifle. It's a kinetic weapon. As you can see, it has kinetic tremors and shoot to loot. This is a very good pick for Nightfalls, especially Grandmaster Nightfalls, where you can't just go out into the middle of a battlefield and pick up ammo if you're low. And for my onslaught weapons, you have two options here. Blast Furnace is a kinetic aggressive frame pulse, and Elsie's rifle is a void energy slot pulse rifle. Pretty much any perk combination you could get on these will be good. I would avoid loose change. It's just not my type of perk. Maybe you could make it work, but I don't like it. Alright, next up we have SMGs. These are going to be your close range option, not quite as close range as sidearms, but we're getting there. First up you have the lightweight SMG. Next up we have adaptive SMGs. Here we have precision SMGs. And lastly, we have the aggressive SMG. Now, personally, I don't notice a huge difference between archetypes in terms of how they feel, so I feel just fine using about any of them. But if you notice a difference, then by all means pick the one that feels the best. For our recommendations, we have Unending Tempest. This you could focus from Shax or get it from the Crucible. Surrounded and Frenzy are really good damage perks, and Subsistence will help a lot. And from Onslaught, we have the famous, or perhaps even the infamous, Recluse. Notably, this could get the Destabilizing Rounds and Repulsor Brace combination that you can see on a lot of Void weapons. Also, Master of Arms is a perk exclusive to the Recluse. It's a pretty unique perk, so maybe check it out. Alright, next up, scout rifles. These are your bona fide long-range option if you're not going to use bows, I guess. Starting out, we have the lightweight frame. This is my favorite one, the 200 scout rifle. If you're having trouble shooting to the correct rhythm, just think of BYOB. That's what I do. Next up, we have the lever action aggressive or 120 scout rifle. I mean, come on, these are just cool. How can you say no to this? Next we have rapid fire or 260 scout rifle. Something to note about these is that they are fully automatic. I believe there's an option in your settings to change all weapons to be fully automatic, but these scout rifles are fully automatic by default. Next we have precision scout rifles or 180s. As you can see, they are just barely slower than the 200s, and that makes me angry. And lastly, we have the high impact or 150 scout rifles. These I just don't feel very good using, but of course, try them for yourself and see if you like them. Now for recommendations, if I'm not mistaken, I believe if you finish the new light quest, Shahan will give you a Night Watch, which is a kinetic 200 scout rifle with overflow and explosive payload. Alternatively, you could focus Jararaka from Banshee when he is selling viced weapons. This is a stasis weapon and it has headstone. Headstone can synergize a lot with your stasis build if you are running stasis as your subclass. And from our brave weapons, we have Hung Jury for like the 14th time. As you can see here, Loose Change is back on the no-go list. No Distractions is more of a PvP perk, so if you want this for PvP, go for it. And I wouldn't really recommend Box Breathing. It's only effective for one shot and then you have to re-proc it, so I would just go for a different damage perk. Next up we have Sidearms. I'm going to start with a bit of a less normal one with the Adaptive Burst Sidearm. This shoots a 3-round burst. And in a similar vein, we have the Heavy Burst Sidearm. This one shoots a 2-round burst. And now we're back to our more normal ones with the Rapid Fire. These only shoot one at a time, one bullet at a time, but they are fully automatic. Next up we have the Lightweight Frame. Once again, these only shoot one bullet at a time, and they are semi-automatic. And we have the Precision Frame, very similar to the Lightweight Frame. Now here we have a real outlier, the Rocket Assisted Sidearm. These are special ammo sidearms. There are only a few of them out in the game. Once again, a very unique weapon. Most likely they will be adding more in the future, probably in seasonal content, so keep a lookout for them. They are very popular and they are for good reason. For my recommendation, we have Sinuna here. It is an Adaptive Burst Sidearm. As you can see, it's an Omelon weapon, so you can focus it at Banshee when he is selling Omelon weapons. And our last category in the list of primary ammo weapons, we have bows. This one's going to be easy. There's only 2 archetypes. You have the lightweight recurve bow, and we have the precision compound bow. My suggestion here is the viced Lunun Lada, however you pronounce that. This one has Shoot to Loot, which, as I said earlier, is good for Nightfall, specifically GMs, or any kind of content where you can't run out into the open so easily. And Headstone, which is just generally a good perk. Alright, shotguns. I told you all I would be talking about this. What I have in the parentheses here is a shape. That shape will be the pellet spread shape. So for our starting archetype here, Rapid Fire, that is a square. as you can see in the background footage. Rapid fires also happen to be my favorite archetype of shotgun. In a close second, we have the pinpoint slug. As the name might suggest, there is no pellet spread because there is just a one pellet. Next up, we have a lightweight frames. This is a diamond pellet spread. Here we have a pretty popular one, as I understand, in PvP, the precision frame, which is an oval pellet spread. And lastly, I had to look this one up. A heptagon pellet spread belongs to the aggressive shotgun frame. For my suggestion, we have a rapid fire shotgun that you can get from the Drifter by focusing your gambit engrams. Notably, this one has trench barrel and 1-2 punch, both of which are really good if you have a melee build. Alright, sniper rifles. Sniper rifles generally you're going to use as a DPS weapon, such as bursting down a champion or a boss in a raid or dungeon scenario. First up we have the rapid fire snipers. Next up we have adaptive snipers. And lastly, aggressive snipers. For my suggestion, once again, we go back to Viced with Irakanji. This one you can get from Banshee when he's selling Viced weapons. Focus Fury is a good all-around perk. Firing Line is also good, but you can't guarantee that you will always have two teammates alongside you. And once again, from Onslaught, we have Succession. This is a very good one. Focus Fury, once again, I would suggest, or something like Vorpal, so you don't have to rely on teammates being around. And I would go with Reconstruction, although if you're worried about ammo, you could always pick up Lead from Gold. Next up we have fusion rifles. Now this is the first of our weapon types, if I'm not mistaken, that is incapable of dealing precision damage, so don't worry about going for headshots. If you see yellow numbers, that means that you have weakened a target with Void. Anyways, here we have a rapid fire fusion rifle. Here we have an adaptive fusion rifle. Next up is precision fusion rifles. And we have high impact fusion rifles. And lastly, we got a bit of an oddball here. The aggressive fusion rifle archetype there is only one of in the game, which you could get from Beyond the Light activities if you own that expansion. Although I wouldn't bother, it doesn't have very good perks, but it is a neat archetype, so hopefully Bungie adds more of these in the future. For my suggestion, we have a Riptide here. It is a rapid fire. Notably, it can get Chill Clip. Chill Clip will allow you to deal with champions without having an actual champion mod in your artifact, so keep a lookout for any weapon that has Chill Clip on it. This one you could focus from Shaxx, who is the Crucible vendor. And additionally, we have what I believe is Crux Lomar Foundry, the Nox Perennial. This one, as of the recording of this video, you cannot focus in the game, but hopefully Bungie will add Crux Lomar as a weapon foundry that you could focus from Banshee in the future. Alright, here we have our special or breech-loaded grenade launchers. First up is your standard single-shot breech-loaded grenade launcher. A few little tech tips, if that's what you want to call it. You can bounce grenade shots off the ground if you hold the trigger down, and they will explode when you release the trigger. Additionally, grenades will not explode if they hit something too close to you or too soon after you fired it out of the gun, so make sure you're standing a good bit away from your target. This is going to be true of all explosive weapons in the future, but explosive weapons are incapable of dealing precision damage to enemies. Next up we have the Wave Frame. This is a very beloved weapon for ad clear capabilities. As you can see, Rather than a radial explosion, we have a wave that travels in a straight line around the ground. Like the normal grenade launchers, you could bounce these off stuff as long as they don't hit the ground. Next up, we have the double fire. There's not many of these in the game, but you could get one of these from a standard activity, that being Nightfalls. These shoot 2 grenades at a time, as the name suggests. Lastly, we have the area denial frame. There's only one of these in the game at current, and it comes from a seasonal thing. It's a pretty cool idea. I don't know if I'm sold on it just yet, but we'll have to see. Alright, we have 2 onslaught suggestions here. First is the mountaintop. Mountaintop acts like a lightweight frame, but instead it shoots a micro missile that travels in a straight line. Very cool, very helpful. Notable perks: auto-loading, overflow, both very good for loading your grenade launcher when you don't have it out. Recombination is a standout here in my opinion in the 4th column. And we have forbearance. This is one of those wave frames that everyone's gushing about. Notably, we have chain reaction in the 4th column, which just adds tremendously to its add clear capability. Next on the special ammo list, we have trace rifles. This is just a laser gun. You hold down the trigger and the laser stays going. There's only one archetype, and that is the adaptive trace rifle. There aren't any trace rifles that you could get from standard gameplay, so I don't really have a suggestion here, and there's none that drops from Onslaught, so you'll just have to find one in a raid or in some seasonal activity. Next up, we have glaives. These are a combination melee and projectile weapon. Pretty cool. They also have a shield that you could deploy to block damage from the front after you build up a charge by shooting things. We have 3 frames here. First, you have the adaptive frame. Next, you have the rapid fire frame. And lastly, the aggressive frame. Once again, there aren't any of these you could focus from normal activities or from Gunsmith Engrams, so I'm not going to have a suggestion here. And now we're moving into heavy ammo with the linear fusion rifles. These are your precision, long-range damage options. Speaking of precision, we have the precision frame. It fires a single bolt. Next up, we have the adaptive burst. This one's pretty cool. It shoots a burst of 3 bolts as opposed to the single of the precision frame. For my suggestion here, we have a Viced precision weapon, Taipan. You could focus this from Banshee, and I believe you could also craft it if you're looking for a specific role. Next up, we have rockets. It's good to have one of these around just in case you have someone in your raid team with Gallarhorn for that extra damage, plus fun to blow stuff up. First, we have the adaptive frame rocket. Next, we have the aggressive rocket. Here's high impact rockets. And lastly, the precision rockets. Precision rockets have a feature where when you zoom into something or ADS onto a target, the rocket will make a beeping sound letting you know that it is tracking that target. If you shoot a target while you are ADS'd, the rocket will track that target. For my suggestions, we have a Hako weapon, Palmyra B. You could focus this at Banshee, Kill Clip and Explosive Light, pretty good, as well as auto-loading holster if you're doing a damage rotation. And a crazier weapon for World Drop, the Crux Lomar Crux Termination. This thing is just stacked with perks. As you can see, Reconstruction, Envious Assassin, Clown Cartridge in the 3rd column, Explosive Light, Bipod, and Surrounded in the 4th column. Surrounded is about a 40% damage increase if you could get it to activate, which is especially dangerous on a rocket, but it's probably worth it. Next up, we have heavy grenade launchers or drum grenade launchers. Let's start with the rapid fire frame. Next, we have adaptive. And lastly, we have the compressed wave frame. These are similar to the special wave frame grenade launchers, except of course you don't have to reload after every shot. And just like the special grenade launchers, you can bounce these off of surfaces or even enemies and they will not explode until they hit the ground. For my recommendations, once again we go to Haka, Marcillian C here. This you could focus at Banshee while he's selling Haka weapons. A personal favorite combination of mine is Envy's Assassin and Cascade Point. As I mentioned earlier, Cascade Point is a bit silly, but equally effective. Go ahead and try it out if you want to see what I mean. And from Onslaught, our brave weapon is Edge Transit. No gooning allowed in here. Notably, we have Cascade Point in the 4th column, which if you're willing to reload very frequently, you could roll with. And it has bait and switch, which is a great damage option. Alright, here's your heavy add clear option machine guns. We're starting out with the rapid fire machine guns. I mean, if you're gonna have a machine gun, you might as well make it shoot as fast as possible, right? Next up we have the adaptive machine guns, or 450s. And lastly, the 360 machine gun. Here we have our recommendations, starting with Kwa Zefan. This is a gambit weapon. Field prep, as I mentioned before, will increase your ammo reserves, so that's always a good perk to have. And from Onslaught, we have Hammerhead. Like with a lot of the other Onslaught weapons, this has almost no bad perks. I would avoid tap the trigger in the 3rd column and under over in the 4th column. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, we have swords. Starting with the adaptive frame, for the most part, all that the frame will dictate is your heavy attack. If you're on mouse and keyboard, light attack will be left click and heavy attack will be right click. Here we have the adaptive, it's an uppercut strike. Vortex swords have this cool spin move. Caster frames shoot out this little hurricane laser thing. Wave frame swords send a wave along the ground and have a follow-up air attack. For my recommendations, we have a geodetic sword. This is an adaptive sword from the Deer, which you could focus from Banshee when he's selling the Deer weapons. And as you can see, it has the famous repulsor brace destabilizing rounds combo. And from our brave weapon, we have another crazy one here. No surprise, Vorpal and Frenzy in the 3rd column, both great damage perks, and in the 4th column, bait and switch, good perk, but also surrounded. And if you're going to be using a sword, a melee weapon, you're going to be surrounded a lot. I didn't mention this when I was talking about 3rd and 4th column perks, but Eager Edge is on the sword. If you get a sword with Eager Edge, I would recommend keeping it regardless of whatever the other perk is, because you could use it for some neat movement tech. And there we have it. There are all the weapon types and all their archetypes. I may have missed some that there are just not very many of that I skipped over or didn't notice in the collections, so let me know if you know one that I missed, I guess. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments, and I may or may not see it and respond to it. Thank you.